Hey guys, this is Dave with Valor Fire Training, and in this week's episode, we have the OG of Smoothbore Cartel and Facebook fugitive, Kyle Romagus, the one and only. He's also a captain at East Montgomery County, Texas, Engine 155. And Kyle and I go way back. We've known each other for a while. Went and did some classes down in Texas, and I had a question come through about moving hose and flowing, and he was one of the first people I thought of just because he's blatantly honest and will tell you exactly what he thinks. So hopefully
Facts.
yeah, hopefully you don't disappoint today, man. That's kind of your MO. You're just brutally honest, but I love it. So this question comes from Alex from Ohio, and his question is, I learned a while back to flow and move while attacking a fire. I've been doing so for quite a while, and I keep getting shit about it from most of the people on my department, including my company officer. I've been talked to several times, and their frustration is that I'm not waiting to see the fire before I open up the line. What are the pros and cons of moving the line versus waiting until you find the seat of the fire? And should I continue to do this, or should I stop doing it in the hopes of making everybody happy? I think, when I saw this message, it was super reminiscent of some issues that I've had in my career, where there's newer research, there's newer ways of doing something. We practice it, we get good at it, and then we catch a lot of shit about it. And I think that it's kind of at its roots, it is a issue of training and maybe knowledge on not necessarily Alex's part, but maybe on the people around him. And so that's kind of why I wanted to bring you in here so we can kind of have a discussion and talk about it and look at both sides, obviously. There is different thoughts on that topic. So Kyle, why don't you go ahead and take it away and see what you have to say.
Well, really, man, there has to be some type of hierarchy of decision making. It's tough to tell a guy, you should do only this or only that. There has to be some type of plan A through D, and the conditions that you find in the building are going to determine which one of those plans you start with. So the new research that we have is doing nothing but vindicate the guys from the 40s, and the 50s that flow and move was their only option, and the biggest thing that I find with people combating the mindset of flow and move is one of three reasons. So either A, their ego is getting in the way and they've never had that fire that they've needed to use the flow and move tactic on, or they, I hate to say it like this, but they lack the ability to perform flow and move. So they just discount the whole idea of it altogether. If I can't do it, there's no reason that you should be doing it, because if you do it, it's going to make me look bad. So that falls into the first category of opposition with the flow and move. The second category of opposition is usually spec. So the spec of hose line and nozzle choice, or specifically nozzle pressure, is the biggest hurdle in that category. Either their spec doesn't allow them to easily flow and move, because you can flow and move with 100 psi nozzles. It just takes a lot more force and technique specifically in order to do that. And then the third end is just a mindset issue, that they refuse to believe anything new or anything. And it's really not new. I hate to describe it like that, is because, the guys in the 40s, 50s, and 60s prior to SCBA, that was their only move. Yeah. Brush says it best in his 75 years of fire streams, is that the only thing that separated the 1950s fireman from the victim was the nozzle. That was it. They needed the nozzle to breathe. They needed the nozzle to move air so that the victim could breathe. And we're in the same situation that they were. We are just fully encapsulated now. And the biggest problem with that is there's a lot less consequence for us for inaction. There was immediate consequence for inaction to the guys prior to SCBA and full encapsulation. And you didn't have to tell a guy to open the nozzle. The guy needed the nozzle to breathe. Flow and move was the tactic. It was the way. It wasn't an option. It was the way, because it was the only way that they could survive in the building. But I would say that the easiest way to explain to Alex a way to combat this is to form a hierarchy of decision making as a nozzleman. and you have to use the environment around you in order to put that hierarchy in play. Is that plan A for me, and I've said it time and time again, is always walk to the fire room and put the fire out. The conditions that I find on the way to do that is how I'm going to adjust my tactic in order to do that. So I'm not worried about protecting myself from a flashover. I'm worried about preventing the flashover from happening in the first place. And the only way we can do that is to control the temperature around and specifically behind us. So there's a lot of studies out there. There's a lot of information out there. Andrew Starnes is the one that opened me up to the mindset of the 200-degree mark. So in the Ignition Handbook, which is a very expensive book that I don't own, that I wish I did, but my homie Andrew Starnes does, and in his research there, the way items are constructed nowadays with the plastics and the hydrocarbons that we have, the majority of those items and the construction of those items start to begin to off gas at the 200-degree mark. And that's the lowest end of the spectrum. It's not everything off gases at 200, but that's a good relative temperature to start from. And the benefit of that with me personally is my tick that I use shows color at 300. So it's a real easy way for me to determine whether or not I need to flow water. And the terms that I use for my guys is, if you see yellow, send blue. There is no ifs, ands, or buts of that for us. But I would say the biggest way to combat that mindset would be to not have a stern feeling on, yes, we need to flow and move all the time, and no, we need to wait till we see the whites of the eyes before we open the nozzle. It's a hierarchy of decision making that has to be understood. It's cause and effect. What I see, and that brings us to a whole another topic, is that the majority of the fire service training that we have, there's no real good explanation from the majority of the country as to, if you see this, do this.
Right.
Or if you see that, do this. Because, let's be honest with ourselves, the majority of the country isn't going to fires every day. They don't have a lot of experience to pull from in that area these days. Now, there are senior men out there that have been making fires since the 80s, since the 70s, that are still on these departments. And shame on you if you don't take advantage of those people and you just push them aside as the old head. Buy that guy a cup of coffee on your off day and get him to tell you how things were dealt with in his time frame and how they've changed into this time frame that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you brought up a couple really good points, and I just, not to cut you off, but I want to hit a couple things that we talked about. The ability versus the spec, and I've come from departments where we ran Go 10, and it's ultra lightweight hose on a 75 psi fog nozzle, and it's a pain in the ass, right? Like, I can't flow and move with that very easily. I can do it. I just have to support it and make sure that it's not going to whip on me, because it's just not designed for that. I've also come from departments that had old legacy style hose with 100 psi nozzles that was so stiff you couldn't get it to bend around a corner. And then we really got into speccing our nozzle and hose packages to be a true attack package. And we put together, we run a 7/8 smooth bore and Pond Supreme. We're actually looking at the Pond 177 now. As we move forward, switching out lines, we're going to start moving to the Gladiator FGN. And we felt like that was a really, really good mesh between those two things. And I think there's so many agencies where you allow the ability of people to sit there and say, well, I can't do this, so you won't do it either. Or they go, we're not set up for this, but we're not going to change it. And it's those two pivotal moments that, like Alex's situation, I guarantee you it's one of those things. I absolutely guarantee you that it's one of those things. Because you and I both have traveled around and done a lot of different classes, and we've seen so many different departments where they're willing to do it, they just don't have the right equipment. Or they have the right equipment, but they just don't know how to. And those are easily fixable. It's when you have one or the other put together, it just creates that like perfect storm where people are like, nope, not going to do it. And it drives me nuts. It's like, it's 2020. We're almost through 2020. It's almost 2021. And we're still dealing with the same thing. And you and I have been talking about it for years now.
Yeah. And it has to come down to the why needs to be explained. And that comes down to the hierarchy, because the how is really easy to explain for a
Yeah.
lot of people, specifically with the information sharing abilities we have with social media, video sharing, things like we're doing right now. The how is a lot easier to put out than the why. And there's not a whole lot of people addressing the why. So I'm actually working on some stuff with Jay Bonifield right now that we're trying to put out next year that we've been working on for about 6 months right now, that explains the why, because the how is out there. The why and the ability to explain to someone the hierarchy of decision making and why they would make those decisions that they make is almost, to me, more important than the how. I can teach a guy how in 45 minutes. I do
Sure.
it all the time with my first engine do class. I would say that probably at least 60 to 75% of the people who take my classes, where our classes with FT Tactics, have never opened the nozzle and moved before. And by the end of the first day, give me 45 minutes with a guy, and I will get him to the point to where he can open the nozzle and move forward at the bare minimum 10 feet. Give me an hour and a half with the guy, and he'll be making turns in hallways.
Yeah.
So the how is easy if you know how to explain skill acquisition and how to adjust body mechanics very well. And you have the right ability to express yourself in a way to where it's received. The how is way easy. Driving home the why is the more difficult part. And I think that's where Alex is going to be finding some issues there, because ego comes into the why a lot more than how. Because it's hard to look at a guy that's been in the fire service and explain to him, hey, there's a different way that we could be addressing this, without him taking it as, well, your way is telling me that I've been doing it wrong for 20 years.
Right.
And that's where you find that headbutt that happens when you're trying to explain something to somebody, is that they don't take it as, maybe I should listen to this guy and hear what he has to say and hear him out and see if he's making any sense. It's automatically a wall. You're telling me that I've been doing it wrong for 20 years, and I don't care what you have to say after that. And it's a big problem for a lot of people. But being able to explain to a guy the hierarchy of decision making, especially for the nozzleman, is very important. And we can go into that if you want. I don't know
Yeah.
how deep you want to go into the hierarchy.
Oh, absolutely. No, let's talk about it. One thing that I do want to touch on though is, and you brought it up specifically, as far as firefighters aren't going to fires like they used to. I wholeheartedly agree with that. We've talked about it a lot on a couple different episodes. But one of the things that I find it kind of comical, because I'm going to make a little stab at you. I still want one of those T-shirts that says, "I know I'm not wearing an air pack," right? But you specifically have gotten a lot of shit on social media for, like, yeah, I'm making stairwell pushes, but I don't have a pack or coat on, and people kind of give you flack about it. But like, even in our classes for Valor fire training, we were just up in Nebraska, and when we did our first floor pushes up the stairwell to the second floor, even though we weren't able to have fire on the second floor, we said, like, hey, there's fire on the second floor. Now we had heat, and we had enough fire from the first floor that it was kind of pushing up, and we had safety lines in place. But we had those guys flowing as they were coming into the building, and to explain the why in words, and then have them go in and see the inflow of air, and you're pushing all those hot gases away from yourself and away from the victim. It was like the light bulb clicked on, and it was so cool to see. Whether it was a first floor attack or a second floor attack, they were breaking off and searching behind the hose. And so as that nozzle was clearing through that hallway, they're pushing all that heat and gas down the hallway, and then they're popping into each room and they're finding victims. And then they're deciding, okay, can I go back out in the hallway? Well, yeah, because it's only like 95 degrees out there. So they take the victim out. And the first couple of rotations that we went through, I mean, they were like literally trying to decide whether they were going to go out in the hallway with 200 degrees or 195 degrees, or do a Venator search style. And so I love what you said, where if you're going to teach them the how, that's easy, but we got to show them the why. And I love that as an instructor, when the light bulb clicks on and you see it in people, you're like, okay, you got it. It's
Yeah.
like the best feeling in the world.
It's almost more important than the how. And before I do anything, whether it's pushing hallways or pushing stairs or just body mechanics, the why has to be said. And I hate to say it like this, but there's a lot of instructors out there that don't really understand the why. And so if you don't understand the why, it's almost impossible for you to explain it.
Right.
And when you give a guy how, you're only giving him half the equation. And that may be where Alex is finding himself, is that he has the how, and I don't know Alex, I've never seen him push or anything like that, so he may have a good grasp on the how, but the whole reason for his question is the why. And I think that's the root of his question, is to how do I explain the why to someone in my organization that's getting a headbutt right now when I show them the how or explain to them the how. And for new guys, and I don't know his experience level, but I'm just speaking in general. For new guys, I would more so rather than be heavy-handed. I would rather than be heavy-handed with the nozzle because they're going to be less likely to get jammed up. And if I can get them to how and the why and get them a little heavy-handed to start out with, then I can gauge them back because I've got a good starting point. After we make a fire, the I can take the guy, the fire was in the toaster. We really didn't have to open the nozzle at the front door. I like what you did, and you
Yeah.
did great, and it looked fantastic. But maybe we start re-engaging the hierarchy of those decisions and why we make those decisions. For me personally, my first plan going into a building on fire, I'm expecting it to be on fire. And I'm expecting my abilities to be able to walk to the fire room and put the fire out. As I open the front door and encounter the conditions that I find is going to drive me from standing to kneeling to on the ground belly if I have to. And those hierarchy decisions are all conditions related. I can't really tell you, on a 1-story Rambler, you're going to open the nozzle at the front door, but on a 2-story Colonial, you're going to wait till you get to the top of the stair. It's all conditions related. So imagine yourself being the guy in pajamas in the hallway. What would you want the fire department to do if you were that guy? Would you want them to wait until they saw the whites of the fire's eyes and not start pre-cooling and shelling the beach before you got there? Or would you want them to cool as they go in that situation? If I'm in a situation where I have low smoke and low heat, most likely the victims in that atmosphere are going to escape that atmosphere. If I have conditions of high heat and low visibility to zero visibility, the chances of them escaping are lower, extremely lower if they haven't already got out. So why would I want to put someone in pajamas in that position, in that high heat atmosphere that we can't tell without a thermal regulation device like a tick? We can't tell that with our gear that we have.
Right.
The old days of waiting to open the nozzle till I feel my ears burn are gone. Our TPP rating of this ensemble that we have is unbelievably good, comparatively speaking, to where it
Oh
used
yeah,
to be.
we're so shielded from it.
And you can't use that as a temperature gauge. UL already put out that you can't use the fall down rate as a temperature gauge as well. The old thought process that if I shoot water in the ceiling and it comes back on me, well, I know at least it's not 212 degrees up there. That is pretty much been ex-nayed by the studies that we have now. I would say to start with the hierarchy of decision making. Plan A, walk to the fire room. That old head is telling you right now, that's plan A for me. As I find conditions that change my abilities to do that, I change the environment. And that would be high heat and smoke conditions that are telling me that heat will soon be fire. And how we can do that is judge, what is the smoke doing? What does it look like? What's the volume? What's the density? What's the color? How fast is it coming out of the building? And how much of that room or home has been filled with that? I would not walk into a warehouse full of propane. It's just an idiotic thing to do from a hazmat perspective without airing the building out. And you are doing a very similar thing by walking into a structure that has black smoke banked down to the floor without opening the nozzle and cooling the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's just a ticking time bomb.
For sure. It takes, one heavy-handed truckie in the front yard to pop a window behind you. And now we're all in bad shape because we waited to open the nozzle until we saw the whites of the eye. So I would say the conditions are going to drive tactics there. So, and the nozzle is so much more than a cooling tool. It's our only means of navigation if we don't have the ability to see the tick. Lots of people around the country don't have ticks, or they have ticks that are showing grayscale, or they have ticks that are this big, that they've had for 25, 30 years. You teach search classes all over the country.
Oh yeah.
Imagine
I've seen some crazy. I've seen the old Navy style ISGs, and people are still running them out there on rigs, and I'm like, damn.
For sure. If the building's on fire and the smoke conditions are zero visibility, we all know that smoke is going to cause that home to most likely be a loss, or at least the contents of that home with the smoke. So do me a favor, Alex. Take half of your clothes out of your closet and put them in one pile, and take the other half and put it in another pile. Soak one pile with water. Just soak it all with water. And then set the other pile on fire. And then tell me which one you can wear tomorrow after you dry them out. You can dry shit out, but you can't unburn it, man. And
Into
we
that.
have to put ourselves in a position that we're putting the citizen first. And if I was the guy in pajamas in the hallway, I would want you to open that nozzle early and often. Me personally. But smoke conditions, heat conditions are going to drive that decision. I use the knob on the front door from the threshold. So if I have black cotton candy to the knob on the door, which is half of that area right there, and we're all talking regular, 2,000 square foot homes and not high vaulted ceilings and everything like that we can add into this. But regular 2,000 square foot home, average home, if I've got smoke banked down past the front doorknob and it's black cotton candy, I'm going to open the nozzle at the threshold and cool everything as I go, just like a SWAT team would clear a room. SWAT teams and military crews, they don't clear 20%, 30% of the home before they move on, or the room before they move on. It's 100% cleared. It's done before they progress through the structure. And we need to think about that as well as the nozzleman, specifically in those high heat and high smoke conditions.
Yeah, and I think that's something that doesn't ever really get discussed outside of the, I would say, and I'm not trying to lump us into the same category with every instructor out there, but I mean, I think when you look at the instructors that are going out there and teaching engine company operations, nozzle work, outside of those type of classes, that doesn't really get talked about. And like, I've seen some really kick-ass pictures on social media of crews that were aggressive with their nozzles and aggressive with their fire attack. And I don't care if you're using a smoothbore, fog nozzle, it doesn't matter to me. But when you see the after pictures, I mean, it looks like there's spaghetti strung up on the wall because they went in there and whipped the shit out of that nozzle and just painted every inch of that house as they were moving down the hallway. And you can see from the front door to the great room to the kitchen, down the hallway into the fire room, it's just spaghetti all over the walls. And that's the best thing to see as an instructor because it lets us know that I don't care if it came from me, you, nozzle forward, whoever, we're getting the message across and they're getting it and they understand it. But yeah, it's definitely, like, I agree with you. There's been a couple times where I've opened up the door and you go in and you're just like, okay, conditions aren't really that bad. And you make it like 8 feet inside and you're like, oh shit, it's not, it can happen that quick, So how do you decide, like, from the door, if you're going to open, if you got the cotton candy, but on the fly, as you're moving, how do you gauge your conditions while you're flowing to know if they get better or worse?
I use smoke. So if I can't see my feet, I'm on my knees. If I can't see my feet when I'm on my knees, I should be flowing water. And we're not talking about a fire in a commercial building that sprinklers have put out and we're looking at white, lazy smoke. We're not talking about that kind of smoke. We're talking about smoke that's black fire, that has been working its way into the manuals. And I hate to use the manuals as an example, but that's what we got. Until we replace them and we kill IFSTA to the death, we have to use IFSTA right now. And it's slowly starting to make its way into the manuals. Fredericks was talking about black fire in the 90s, and guys prior to him were talking about black fire. So the smoke is fuel more than ever before today. With the hydrocarbons that we're using in all of our building materials and all of our synthetics that are used to make everything now, smoke is fuel, man. And like I was saying at the beginning of this thing, it takes 200 degrees to start off gassing, not to ignite, but to start to off gas. So at 200 degrees, we're starting to pour gasoline in the building. And we have to address that frozen gasoline that we make everything out of. So I would say my hierarchy, my next step versus walking to the fire room and putting the fire out, which is where old head is telling him to do, the smoke conditions would change that for me. And the way I try to describe it is that I open the nozzle where I would want to call for water. So if I'm stretching dry into a building, so if you have a lot of multi-story buildings, you got a fire on 2, they've got clear conditions on 1, I'm going to stretch dry to the stairwell until when I call for water, at that point, I'm concerned. And if I'm concerned, I should be flowing water at least in a forward trajectory into the area that I'm going to be entering as a prep. You know, we want to shell the beach, so to speak, before we make entry. You know, I don't want to fight the phone booth if I don't have to. You know, I want to prep that area for my arrival so I don't catch anything behind me, specifically with top floor fires with no ventilation up top. So that would be my condition, would be where I want to call for water if I haven't already. And I'm in a department with a culture, like in a multi-story building, where I want to call for water. I'm going to stretch dry as far as I can, because dry hose is easier to move than wet hose. But I'm going to stretch dry as far as I can. And when I call for water, I should be opening that nozzle to that area. Or else, why did I call for water at that? You
Right.
know, I'm not concerned yet. You know, but we're real big on charging from the threshold, because we don't have, you know, 4 or 5 story multifamilies where I'm from. You know, but if I had 4 or 5 story multifamilies, I wouldn't be charging at the street and dragging wet hose up 4 flights of stairs. You know, so
It's a whole other topic for another time. But yeah, it's crazy the amount of people, and I'm guilty of it too, man. I mean, I've held hose up 2 or 3 stories. You know, it sucks.
and people have to get it in their mind and jumping topics. We have to get in their mind when they take classes from guys like me and from guys like you, from guys like Aaron Fields. We are prepping you for worst case scenario. What you're doing in my first engine do class, we're assuming that it's worst case scenario. We have high heat, we have high smoke conditions, we've got black cotton candy, and that's why we're prepping you for that. If I go and teach at a conference, I may have 2 hours with a guy, and then I've got 100 other guys that I'm going to see that day. And I want to prep him for worst case scenario. Nobody wants to go to a fire conference and talk about fire in the trash can. Guys want to go to a fire conference and talk about how to combat the worst case scenario. And that's why, relating back to what you were saying about seeing spaghetti in the building and being happy about it, is because we're prepping them for the worst case scenario. And in that worst case scenario, water is everywhere. We clear everything as we go through it, because we want to keep it from lighting off behind us and anybody that has not been found in those areas. So 26% of fire victims are found by the engine crew on the first line, 50% survival rate. You know, so we want to put our guys in a position to where we can prep those areas that we have not been able to get to. We're taking the direct line of sight to the seat of the fire as the first in engine company and searching on the way and the passive egress. But what you don't do in that position is, we're not going to stop every 5 feet and search out, and then stop every 5 feet and search out. You know, as the first in engine company, my job is to put water on the seat of the fire. So I'm freight training to the seat of the fire and addressing conditions on the way. So I'm not searching the living room as on, if the fire's in a bedroom. Somebody else behind me is searching that living room. So if I've got conditions that are conducive to not surviving that area, I need to fix it. You know, don't be stingy with the solution, man. You got the solution in your hand. So fix it. It's what I would want them to do if I was the guy in pajamas.
Yeah. And that's why I love talking to you about this, man, because it not only is your passion amazing to begin with, it's that slap in the face that everybody needs. And that's why I love having this discussion with you, because, you know, you and and I don't know if you remember this, but when we were down in Bronx, Texas, you and I had that discussion. And I said, you know, man, it kills me the amount of times that somebody will come out of a fire and they'll be like, man, we only use 250 gallons. We kick that fire's ass. I'm like, why don't you use 750? That's what's on the fucking truck. Well, you know, because we got the fire knocked down real quick. You know, we didn't want to flood the house. I'm like, but you can dry it out. Like, it doesn't matter to me if you use 250 or 750 or 1,000. Whatever you got to use to get that fire out, is what we should be using. And so, but again, I digress back to, that's a cultural thing that we've always had in the fire service. You know, it's no different than me getting yelled at for breaking out a whole entire window and breaking out the casement and shoving it out into the yard. Well, God, Dave, why'd you break that window? Now they're going to have to replace it. Well, the insurance company is going to replace it anyway. You know, it's just that mindset that we've always had and nobody's ever really challenged.
Yeah. And there's a lot of places that don't have insurance, and we can have that conversation when that comes up. You know, I would say the majority of the residents in my area probably don't have insurance, but I want to give them the best option for living. I want to give their families the best option for living. And the building is occupied in every room until we clear that room and say it's not. So I need to operate as if there is a victim lying in every corner in every room I pass through. And if that area is not survivable, I want to make it so. Specifically, if I have the tools to do so. If I have the solution in my hand, I'm not going to be stingy with it. you know, and there has to have the hard conversation of what's survivable or what's not. And smoke has to be brought into that conversation. You know, I would say the majority of our fire victims are not burnt. A majority of our fire victims are killed with smoke.
Yeah.
And there's another topic that we can get into on the level of contraction of gases, reversal of flow path, just with opening the nozzle. So I use the nozzle for a lot of things, and not only just cooling. I use it as a navigation tool. I use it as sonar for stream sounds. I use it to find doors and windows and hallways. You have to be able to use that tool for what it's capable of. I refer to it as headhunting, and that's a term I got from Gary Lane, is that if I'm in zero visibility and I'm looking for a hallway, I'm going to bring the nozzle chest high and sweep until I hear the sound change. After I hear the sound change at chest high, I'm going to confirm that being a door or a hallway, because a hallway is just a long door. So I'm looking for that door frame that I'm looking for. So if I'm chest high sweeping a wall and I hear the sound of that stream fall away from me, very first thing I'm going to do is sweep the floor in front of it. If I sweep the floor in front of it and it gets closer to me, most likely that's a window, or I've got furniture in front of it. Something is different. So it's not just a cooling tool. It's a navigation tool. It's sonar. Stream sounds is the key. As soon as you open that nozzle up as the nozzleman, I would say 90% of the time you're going to lose visibility. So if you don't have a good idea of where you're going or where the fire is, or haven't got good information from your company officer on where we're going, that stream is going to tell you where you're going. If I know the fire's down a hallway, all I got to do is find the hallway. If I find the hallway, that will lead me to the next issue.
Well, and I had a captain early on in my career who taught me this. And I mean, this is back in the days of the T, the Z, and the O, which I'm pretty sure is still in the book.
Yeah.
But when we started doing fire attack stuff, he kind of pulled me off to the side. He said, "Hey, here's the deal." He said, "When you start attacking a fire," he said, "I don't give a shit if you use the T, the Z, or the O. Totally up to you." But he said, "When you start, I want you to start as far left as you can and go as far right as you can and come back." And he goes, "You need to listen for the sound." Because he said, if you're in a square, if you're in a room or a hallway and you hear it over here and then you hear it hit the wall over here, he goes, as you're making that repetitive pattern back and forth, if you stop hearing it on this side, that room's opening up over here for some reason, whether it's a hallway, whether it's a room opening, whatever it is. And so, hell, that was 1998. And so it was just the old school mentality of like, these are the things that they learned when, as soon as they open up the nozzle, their eyes got burned. They had and he talked about it. He was like, yeah, he's like, we didn't ever wear air packs. We had them. We didn't wear them because they were stupid. He said, as soon as we opened up the nozzle, you were getting choked out. You couldn't see, you couldn't breathe, you couldn't do anything. All you were doing was hoping that you were going to get the fire put out fast enough before you had to get out to get air, or before you had to get down.
For sure. So imagine, and one of my battalion chiefs explained this to me a long time ago. Heat moves through the building as water would. So imagine, take the building, turn it upside down. So if we have a fire in a bedroom, take that building, turn it upside down, and pour water in it. That water is going to pull on the ceiling, which is now the floor. It's going to raise up, and once it finds an avenue of escape, it's going to take that avenue of escape. Heat's going to do the same thing. We need to meet the building in the same way the heat is meeting the building. And we need to affect that systematically through the building. So if I'm in an area that's already affected by heat and smoke, I need to fix that with the solution. So, and what you're talking about, what you just spoke about, is reading and confirming the building. I have a visual mindset of what this building should look like. And I'm going to read that building with the nozzle by using stream sounds at the ceiling and confirm that with the audible signal that comes off of that. And that's how we find out what type of room we're in and when the lights go out. So 9 times out of 10, I walk to the front door, I'm going to be in the great room in my construction. I'm going to be in the great room. If it's a 2-story, stairs are going to be to the left or the right. I could have determined that with my 360, but say we didn't. At that point, I can start head hunting and looking for things that are familiar, or listening for things that are familiar, to get me a read in my head on what this building looks like. So if I've got fire blowing out of the Charlie side of this structure, I know the fire is probably not on the A side yet. So I need to start making my way towards that Charlie side of that structure, most likely looking for a hallway or a large room on that side of the house. So, I mean, using that ability to read and confirm in those zero visibility areas. And if I've got zero visibility, everything's getting water, man. I don't care what anybody tells me, because at that point, I have reached the point where everything is beginning to off gas. If I've got a bedroom fire that's filling up a 2,000 square foot home, it's not just the bedroom that's off gassing. You know, everything in that area, and wet shit don't burn, man. One of the things that was very unfortunate that I heard at Water on the Fire this year in Pensacola from one of the UL guys that were speaking at that conference is that they could not get a room to flash because the carpet was wet. So they had wet carpet all in the room and everything else was dry, but the room neglected to flash. They also neglected to put that in the report. And I think that was very irresponsible on someone's part, because that information needs to be spoken. It needs to be said to people that are reading those reports, is because the floor caused the room not to flash. That's prevention that we can do from the threshold of that room.
Well, and think about the implications, and let's talk specifically about that, because I had heard the same statement from other people. In fact, it may have been you at some point. I know we've talked about some things, but let's talk about the ramifications of that being included in that report. I mean, that's a game-changing thing for a lot of departments. I mean, if I can show up on a fire and I got limited staffing, and the best thing that I can do is get 15 feet inside that house and start flowing a shit ton of water and get every inch of that floor covered in water, I might be able to stop a flashover from occurring. I mean, that's essentially what I read that as.
For sure. Prevention, not protection.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be something as simple as a little oversight like that. Like, I don't think that UL did it intentionally. I know that they didn't do it intentionally because of all the effort and time that they've taken to improve the fire service. But it's so amazing to me that just that one little sentence at the end of your one little phrase at the end of a sentence could have drastically changed everything, you know?
Yeah. And it's funny with the UL studies is that, you know, everybody was quick to jump on the transitional attack study, but when the stream study came out, everything in the UL stream study, there in the coordinated attack and vent study, everything in that study promotes flow and move. Yeah. Everything in that study promotes flow and move. So they're quick to jump on the transitional attack and change protocols, and first water will come from outside, you know, after that study comes out. And then everybody's like pumping the brakes, like, hang on, guys, there's more studies. This is part one. Let's wait till part 4 and 5 come out before we make some decisions, man. Yeah, let's pump brakes a little bit. You know, there's some things that haven't been talked about yet. You know, and that's what's funny is that guys were quick to jump on that UL study for transitional, but when the coordinated attack study comes out and 90% of the information is in favor of flow and move, they're like, oh, what do they know? A bunch of scientists with lab coats. Like, okay, so this study's okay, but this study's not. It's just kind of crazy to me.
Yeah.
You know, and we're guilty of that as well. You know, so there's a lot of guys that took that transitional attack study and just automatically poo-pooed it. You know, it's like, this is bad information and we shouldn't be doing this, and we're going to go inside it. And it's like, man, none of that addressed going inside. That's part 2. Part 2 hasn't come out yet. You know, just pump the brakes a little bit, put it in the library, read it, wait for part 2 and 3 to come out.
Well, and we had a laugh. I still to this day laugh about that study in the rural setting, because, you know, where I volunteer, you know, there's times where we show up on a fire with 2 or 3 people, and that's great, you know, for a little bit until you get more units coming or get more rigs on scene. You might only have 2 or 3 people. And so it was so funny when the first study came out, because we were like, yeah, so that's what we've been doing for like the last 50 years. I mean, you know, for us, it was no big deal. We were early adopters even before they did the research. And, you know, so it wasn't a huge thing for us. But even here, like in the Midwest, a lot of departments jumped on the bandwagon and they were like, hey, this is great. We can hit the fire from the outside, get it knocked down. This is awesome. And then it was almost like they just decided, okay, we're going to knock the shit out of the fire. And then, oh, wait, do we still have to go inside? It was like they were having these serious conversations like, do we still have to go in and put the fire out? It's like, yeah, that's, oh my God.
Yeah. And, you know, and I'm not one of those guys that is going to sit here and preach to you that all water should come from the inside. But if there's a delay, if there's a delay to getting inside, water should be put on the fire. But don't let water from the outside delay you from getting inside. You know, they don't go hand in hand. You know, inside fire requires inside water. That's 101 type shit. You know, so excuse me, I don't know if this is cuss worthy, but
Oh, you can say shit all you want, man.
okay, there you go. That's 101 shit, man. You know, inside fire needs inside water. And if there's a delay to get inside, put water on the fire. And that's exactly what the transitional attack study said. People cherry picked the study and pulled small sentences out, but they forgot to read all the sentences that 99% of the fires rebounded by the time they got there. You know, it's just, they take small parts and pieces out of these studies to vindicate decisions that they have either already made or going to make.
Yeah.
You know, and it's sad and unfortunate. Very sad and unfortunate.
So, in getting back to Alex's original question, which we're definitely still in the same rabbit hole. I mean, we've got to branch off a little bit right, a little bit left, but we're good. But getting back to his original question, you know, I think, in my opinion, you know, you're right. There has to be a hierarchy. You have to be able to decide when it is applicable and when it is not applicable. But I definitely would not say stop doing it altogether. I mean, there's a certain side of me, and I think you and I are very similar in this respect. Like, there's a certain part of me not knowing if he's like a probationary firefighter or something like that. Like, if you're probationary, Alex, don't do this. But if you've been around for a couple of years and you're not the new person, you're the one on the knob. Like, you decide when you're going to flow water. And if it gets down to the point where you're really catching that much crap, like Kyle's saying, you know, the education side of it, the explaining the how and the why. And, you know, we're always available. You're always available. And we're going to put your contact info after this. Alex, you can get a hold of Kyle and you can get the information that you need from him. But there's part of me that frustrates me as a firefighter. It frustrates me as a company officer that this dude in Ohio is being told not to flow under any circumstance. Got to wait until you find the seat of the fire. And I just wanted to make that perfectly clear. Like, I feel like we've talked about enough to at least form that opinion of don't just stop doing it. You need to know when to do it and when not to do it. And then you can base your decision off of that, whether or not you want to ruffle it.
So let's give him the why of both. So let's start with hit and move. So hit and move is what he's talking about. So at that point, I'm going to wait till I see the fire to open the nozzle. So in those situations where it would be more advantageous, because this, let's be honest, it's going to be about 90% of what you do is going to be hit and move. So me personally, I teach everyone to flow and move the last 5 feet. So even if you're not going to open the nozzle till you find the fire room, open the nozzle and move 5 feet in. Keep the nozzle open. And I always recommend, that's why every single one of my classes, I make sure that every single person that's there can at least flow and move 5 feet. That's it. Flow 5 feet and make a turn, either left or right. That's what should be done at every single fire we go to, at least the last 5 feet. Now, when we're talking about flow and move 30, 40, 50 feet, and those situations, we can talk about that why, but let's not jump away from hit and move. So hit and move. I want to rent a space. So I want to flow and move, but I can't yet. Either it's furniture in the way, or I don't have enough hose yet, or I'm hung up on a pinch point. You know, there's no reason for me to sit there and take a beating. So I'm going to flow a little water and I'm going to shut down a little bit, make a little room over there, you know, rent a space, or I'm trying to locate the seat of the fire. So if I have a hallway that is presenting with a fireball down this hallway, and I'm assuming that one of those rooms is on fire, I'm going to launch water into that hallway and shut down and see what happens. So what's going to happen is the gas flame is going to extinguish immediately. As soon as your nozzle opens up in that hallway, the gas fire is gone. Now you need to look and see and evaluate where the gas fire begins to come back from.
Right. What's behind
seat
door
fire?
One, what's behind door two?
Correct. Seat fire is going to act differently than gas fire because seat fire is fed from somewhere that it's offset or shielded in that situation. So I'm going to launch water in the hallway, find out where that is coming from, and make my decision in my angle to actually kill the room. Because compartment firefighting, we want to stuff it back in the compartment and kill the compartment. That's the whole point. So we want to put a cork in the pressure problem. So we're dealing with a fuel problem or a pressure problem. The fuel problem is in the hallway. The pressure problem is in the room. And I can't stop the problem until I kill the pressure problem. So I kill the local problem in the hallway by launching water. I find out where the pressure problem is coming from, take the right angle, and put water in the room to stuff a cork in the pressure problem. stuff it back in the compartment, kill the compartment. That's the whole intention of what we're doing. The fire has systematically taken over the building. We want to systematically take the building back in the opposite order that the fire took the building. So if it started in the room, extended to the hallway, extended from the hallway into the living room, we're going to take the building back from the living room to the hallway to the bedroom. If it hasn't had a long time to burn, most likely those areas that aren't the seat are a gas fire, easily put out by a small amount of water. And if we do that, it will tell us where the pressure problem is coming from. So, hit and move reasons, I want to rent a space. I want to make sure that I can move into that space without having the high heat in that space. Or I want to determine where the seat is coming from. So I don't necessarily want to flow and move because I don't know where I'm going yet. I don't know where the fire is in relation to the hallway. Is it on the right in that room? Is it on the left in that room? Is it on the end of the hallway? So at that point, I would want to flow water. Discover where that area is. Another reason for hit and move is navigation, like we were talking about earlier, stream sounds. I enter the living room, I can't see. I want to find the hallway. I'm going to headhunt. Open the nozzle till I hear it fall away, sweep chest high. Then I can shut down and see what happens. So those are the reasons I would use for hit and move in layman's terms. And we can go further into it, but I don't know how much time you got here. So let's move to flow and move. So flow and move, the reasons for flow and move is A, I've got a pressure problem that I can't stop from where I am. I'm not in a position to win right now. I'm just buying time and I'm trying to locate where that is. So if we're looking into an offset room from a hallway or a living room, I can access maybe 5% of that room with my nozzle at that point. I can't access more of that until I get closer. And what I want to do is stuff that back into the room, and I do that with the nozzle. So I'm going to put that stream in that top third of that doorway because that's where the problem is exiting that doorway from. And I want to stuff it back in that room, cause gas contraction, which will bring cool, clean air with me as long as I have a vent behind me. Everything gets better for everybody on the way. So everybody wants to talk about gas expansion. Nobody wants to talk about gas contraction, whether they don't understand it or they've never been taught it. It's Charles' law. Look it up. Charles' law. Heated gases expand, cool gases contract. That's what happens. That's what we do with our nozzle. So flow and move. Shielded fire that I can't access right now. I can't fix the problem where I am. So I want to make room in order to do that. I kill the pressure problem by putting the nozzle in the doorway. Once I get to the doorway, I'm back to a fuel problem. So we're in a series of determining what kind of problem we have when we go into a residential fire. Most likely through the front door, I've got a local problem. I cool the local problem differently than the pressure problem. So I walk into the living room, I cool the local problem with wide sweeping motions. I find the hallway, I locate the pressure problem. I keep the nozzle entrained on the doorway and not move wide sweeping motions because it's not a local problem anymore. It's a distant pressure problem. So I use that nozzle in that doorway to stuff the pressure problem back in the room until I can make my way to that. If I stop flowing water, it's burping back out at me. I've got instant rebound because I can't fix the problem where I am. I get to a point to where I'm chest in front of the problem. Now I've got a local problem again. I use the wide sweeping motions in the local problem and we high five and drink Gatorade. I mean, it's really not that hard for a lot of people who make fires. And that goes back to the first thing we talked about is that fires are down for a lot of people. We made 96 fires in my fire district last year. 96. First due. And I'm not talking about fires on the stove. These are multiple alarm or full single alarm fires, 96. And I'm not sitting here puffing my chest out. I'm just saying that not everybody's not going to fires anymore. You know, there are areas that are mainly EMS driven. And I wish those guys, and I don't want anybody's house to catch on fire. So don't look at me thinking that I'm this arsonist. I don't want anybody's house to catch on fire. But if it does, I want to be in the driveway. That's just me. You know, so.
And I think that's the dichotomy of the issue of wanting to go to fires and wanting to train on fire and get good at putting fire out. You know, again, this is a discussion that we've all had at some point. Why are people upset about people wanting to go to fires? I mean, you know, and yeah, you can make that case like, oh, you want somebody's shit to catch on fire and burn? No, dude, I want to be able to show up and do a really good job and stop them. Police officers don't want anybody to get hurt or get involved in a crime, but they sure as hell want to do a
Right.
really cool foot pursuit and stop the bad
And they
guy.
go to the range.
Yeah, like that's what they do. And so, for us, it's very similar. Like I don't want people's stuff to catch on fire, but I do want to be able to show up and save their shit. And
Yeah.
that makes me feel good when I'm able to do that. So yeah, no, I completely agree. Now, I want to touch on something before I forget. When you talk about flow and move, I feel like we have to at least have a discussion about GPM as it relates to the modern fires. So, taking away, the industrial buildings, the 450,000 square foot, industrial building or warehouse. If I'm talking about residential structure fires and maybe even getting into some McMansions, uh, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was 95 gallons. Now it's, 150. I would make the case that I would feel even more comfortable with 180, 160 to 180 is like my sweet spot. And then moving my way all the way up to 300. What's your like ideal flows to be able to flow and move or hit and move and be able to put the fire out?
My ideal flow is 160. I'm a 7/8 guy. And that stems from my manpower. If I had four, and I'm lying, if I had four guys on the truck, I'd still be running a 7/8.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of guys personally that love the 15/16, and I'm not hating on those guys. But with low manpower, I want my nozzle men to be able to control that nozzle reaction and not have to have me behind him. So on a 3-man engine, I got a driver, I got myself as the captain, and I got the guy that works for a living in the back. So I'm a plugman that wears a red hat initially. So if I had a fourth guy on the rig, he could be the plugman and I could do officer shit. But I don't live in that world.
Right.
So I'm back behind him working pinch points and moving hose into the structure, and I don't have the ability to be a company officer, so to speak, in that aspect. And I want my nozzleman to be able to have a flow that will get him out of a jam if he finds himself in a jam instantaneously. I want a nozzle that is flowing enough to cause immediate positive change in the worst case scenario. I'm in a big room, the bang goes off, and he can open that nozzle and sweep, and he will be successful in stuffing that back to where it's coming from. And I would point anybody who's interested in the flow talk to a quantitative approach to nozzle selection and stream by Jason Vestal. You can find it on the ECR page in the file section. It's a fire engineering article that originated from fire engineering, or you can reach out directly to Jason Vestal. He's on Facebook. He probably hates me for doing this right now, but so don't send him any pictures of your anatomy, but reach out to him. Reach out to him on Facebook and ask him about it, and he'll explain it to you. And it's a part 1 and 2 to that article, and that ended the debate for me specifically for nozzle style, whether it be smoothbore or fog, and flow rate. And in this article, specifically in part 2, he talks about worst case scenario 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. At the 1100 degrees Fahrenheit point, the 160 flow had enough to instantaneously cause positive change in that environment and still have rain down from that ceiling level to cool unburned fuels. So I want a flow rate to cause positive change and prevent that from getting worse by having rain down. And that 160 flow gives it to me. Now, granted, I will tell you that he supports 15/16 flow in this article just due to possibilities of kinks, because 160 is the line of flow that you need to have in that worst case scenario. And one kink in a 160 and a 7/8 drops you below that.
Yeah.
But, it just comes down to spec, me personally. So I'm a 160 guy. A lot of guys read that article, and himself included, Jason Vestal's a 15/16 guy, just due to the fact that one or two kinks can bring him to the 160 range out of that 185, and he'll still be in that cushion. But I choose the 160 just specifically for my manpower and the abilities of the nozzle.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of success with the 160, so much so that we actually ordered a 160 of 50 fog and paired that with our 7/8 smoothbore. And they sit in a compartment. We don't ever really put them on the nozzle unless we have to, or we're doing training or something with the gas prop. But it was nice that we had the ability to do that. And I have no issues with 15/16. But what really scares me, and if we look at the nozzle manufacturers out there and just the fire department culture, they're still producing and people are still buying in mass quantities selectable gallonage nozzles from 30, 60, 95, 125, 150, or 60, 95, 125, 150, 200. And I'm like, dude, why do you even give them the option? Like,
Yeah,
I don't want my guys to have that option. And we had a
sure.
really good discussion when we were up in Nebraska. Um, we killed some triple layer, which, I figured you'd be happy about that.
Death to the triple layer.
Yep,
Hoorah.
we were the triple layer slayer. And we also kind of got them hooked up on the idea of a smoothbore just because of that fact. Like, they have minimum staffing, rural community. They have a ton of water. I mean, this department has it's like a 10,000 gallon semi that they're hauling around water in. It's ridiculous. So they don't have a shortage of water getting on scene once they get it there. And so we said, hey, why are you guys still fighting fires with these selectable gallonage nozzles? Like, what do you guys normally pull on a house fire? They're like, oh, we pull like 5 or 6 inch and 3/4 line. I'm like, okay, well, if we showed you something that would give you the ability to punch the fire in the throat and would make it a lot easier with less people, would you guys be interested in that? They're like, yeah. And so we did. We talked about the difference between the 15/16 and the 7/8. But when we set them up on their unit, we had them flow their rig as they would on a normal fire. And each one of their lines was averaging 95 gallons. Somewhere in there, 90, 95, 97. But that's how they were fighting fire. And I don't think that's unique to that area. I think there's a lot of departments in the country as a whole that are still doing that.
I would say the selectable gallonage is probably one of the most dangerous nozzles to have on the fire ground, just specifically because it's hard to put a level of expectation as to what happens when you open that nozzle. So
Right.
if our level of expectation is at the 150 flow or the 200 flow, let's just say that if I am a company officer and my level of expectation of firefighting ability comes from a set flow, and we enter a building with less than that flow, I go into it with the mindset that if I see this, I'm going to do this, and this is going to happen. But if I have less than what I'm expecting, I can't have that level of expectation. And this is kind of a sketchy topic because I hate to say this in a format like this, but people would be surprised as to how little water it takes to extinguish bedroom fires. But there's also a but, and it's a big but. In the worst case scenario, there's no cushion. With a 95 GPM nozzle, there's no cushion for if the shit's on. And you're looking at a big bang in a big room. That 95 gallons a minute ain't gonna cut it. You're gonna be in a bad spot. And that's where that cushion of that 160 flow to the 185 flow comes in. But you can read in the UL studies and dive in. They're using, less than 500 gallons of water on some, and usually less than 100 gallons of water on some of those experiments
Yeah.
that they did. And those are fires that have gone to flash over. Those are not small, trash can fires that they've studied. Those are rooms that's flashed over, 2 rooms that's flashed over, and they're using less than 500 gallons in order to do it. So I would say, in response to that question, there's only 2 reasons a nozzle won't extinguish fire. 2, either A, there's not enough flow, B, you're not putting it in the right spot. So you can have the best flow in the world, but if you're putting it in the wrong spot, ain't nothing happening. And that's where that gauge comes from to find that pressure problem, as to be able to put the nozzle in the right spot. Because we can go in with a 300 gallon a minute nozzle, and if we're not putting it in the right spot, nothing positive is going to happen.
Right.
We
Yeah,
we
it out of a window.
that's right. We could dump 300 gallons a minute into that room, and if it's not in the right spot, it's just going to keep coming out. So really 2 reasons why I won't go out: not enough flow, or it's not in the right spot. And if you're flowing that 150 to 185 range there, chances of it not having enough flow are slim for a 1 to 2 room bedroom fire. So we made our nozzle selection pretty easy for our company officers. We took the NFA fire formula and turned it upside down. So we use GPM times 3. So we use 160 for our flow on 1 3/4. You multiply that by 3 and it gets you 480, and that's the square foot. So 2,000 square foot homes in my district on average. If I pull up and I've got 1/4 of the building burning, I'm going to pull 1 3/4. And 300 gallons a minute is my 2.5. So 300 gallons a minute times 3 is 900 square feet. So if I'm looking at half of this building on fire, I'm gonna punch it in the throat with the 2.5, gauge down or bundle off to the 1.75 and finish it off. My deck gun runs 600 gallons a minute on tank water. 600 times 3 is 1,800. So if I'm looking at 100% involvement, if I can get a good angle with the deck gun, I'm going to deck gun as much as I can, drop down to the 1.75 and finish it off. Yep. Compartment firefighting is not hard things to do. We stuff it back in the compartment, we kill the compartment. We've got 5 rooms on fire, systematically stuff it back in the compartment and kill the compartment. It's not rocket science, you know.
Well, and you know, it's funny that you mentioned that, and you've said it several times, and I laugh each time you do. It isn't rocket science. And I feel like we totally overcomplicate this shit to the point where, you know, I know I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of watching some fires on social media or, you know, Facebook Live, and I'm like, okay, the bulk of the fire is on the first floor, but they're shooting the deck gun into the second floor window. Why? Like, it's pretty simple. If the fire's on the first floor before it gets to the second floor, you got to put the first floor out and then move your way upstairs. Because you can put the whole upstairs out, but you still got all that heat coming up underneath. And it's like, again, I'm going to say it. I said it earlier. I'll say it again. It's 2021 almost. And we're still having these same fucking conversations. And I'm still trying to rack my brain around.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. YouTube will drive you crazy watching guys screw up on YouTube, you know, but there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube as well. You know, San Francisco has a lot of good stuff. You know, the San Francisco, the San Bernardino area, they go to fires, man, and they do very well. You know, and there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube, but there's a lot of poor things that happen on YouTube too. And it's just kind of crazy.
And
as to why somebody, go ahead.
I was going to say, to counter that real quick, dude, some of the best stuff that I've learned was from the bad shit on YouTube. I mean, and truly, honestly, I mean, there's some stuff where I've watched it and I've been like, okay, as a company officer, if that happened to me, how would I handle it? Or I go to other people on my crew and I'm like, hey, if this happened on a fire, how would we deal with it? So, you know, you can always polish your turd a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah,
fire service is tricky, man. It's one of the only professions that the lesson comes after the test. So it's an advantage to us to use the tests that other people have taken to form lessons and expand on them.
Absolutely. So getting back, I just want to wrap back around to Alex's question. Alex, I definitely think the hierarchy thing, and Kyle, I can't thank you enough for explaining that. You know, the hierarchy thing is super, super, super important. I definitely, and I think Kyle, we agree on this, I definitely would not, you know, stop doing it altogether. I think that, you know, you maybe need to have that conversation with your company officer and with your crew. And the one thing that we didn't really touch on, which I know I'm very blessed, you're very blessed in your organizations. If I work overtime, I am a completely different firefighter than I am on my shift. Like, my shift allows me to be a firefighter the way I want to be a firefighter, and they're cool with it, and we work together, and it just jives. If I go to another shift, I'm primarily not as aggressive because they don't like that. They don't want that. It's caused, you know, it's rubbed people the wrong way. So I think just kind of feeling out who you're dealing with and figuring out how you can handle that in a positive conversation and bringing up some of the information that Kyle has thrown out there. I think that would help tremendously.
And be careful of your attitude when you bring this up, Alex. My buddy Rob Fisher says it best: 5% pressure 100% of the time. You can't go 100% pressure 100% of the time. It's going to be white noise. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to put you off as just some crazy person. It's 5% pressure 100% of the time. Just little small wins in the direction that you want to change the culture in is much better off than trying to just dump a bunch of culture change on people. And we're actually going through that in my department right now with the truck company. So we just recently got a truck company in. Now we're specing new rigs to come specifically all off the rear to make room for the truck company. And guys are like looking at this change as their avalanche is coming down on them. It's like, oh my God, yeah, there's just too much. There's too much right now, you know. And you know, like Rush says, we're change fighters, man. You know, a lot of people want to call themselves firefighters, but we're change fighters, and that's a big part of the country. But Alex, I would give you that piece of advice to close: is 5% pressure 100% of the time, small wins in that area.
Which I wish I would have met Rob about 20 years ago in my career, and that would have been really helpful. He actually told me that when we were out in Portland, and it was, I don't know, man. I mean, I really, that has held true, and I've used it and it works. And I know you have as well, Kyle. A lot of the guys that we know have used that direction, and it's all worked. So, um, Kyle, I can't thank you enough. I know I've been saying this every time because I know this is only like episode 7 or 8 or something like that. But I know we'll have you back on to discuss another topic. It's always fun to have you on. Um, I know that there's really great things coming down in Jobtown where you're at. I see fires all the time. I've asked your chief if I could come down and ride with you guys.
Come
So,
on.
yeah. Gotta wait for COVID to be over. But yeah.
Yeah.
So, no, I appreciate it, man. And Alex, like I said, I'm going to put Kyle's contact information in the description so you can get a hold of him if you want. You can always send me any emails. I know I've said this almost every video. You guys have been awesome about sending us questions. So definitely keep that up. You can hit us up on social media. If you're watching this on YouTube, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe. We're definitely going to keep doing these. This is going to be, we're going to try and do 1 or 2 a week. It's kind of our goal. And we'll spit them out there on Instagram, social media, Facebook, YouTube, and all that good stuff. So thanks for tuning in. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
No problem, man. You can reach some of us on social media, not all of us.
You got me on that one, man. I forgot. So now, correct me if I'm wrong. Just real quick, correct me if I'm wrong. The Smoothbore Cartel Facebook page is still operational, correct?
Yes, and so is ECR. So you can reach me through the message portion of Smoothbore Cartel, or on Smoothbore Cartel on Instagram. They haven't kicked me off of that yet, so we'll see. And if you want some swag, check it out.
Oh yeah. All right, sounds good. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, buddy. Have a good day.
You too.